as I was just introducing myself, I'm basically a DevOps engineer by profession, and I do teaching more from of my passion. Okay, so since we have a couple of people wherein we have some development experience, and also we have a couple of us from the administration background, I think it will be a little easy for you guys to understand what I'll be talking. The agenda, what I'll be touch basing today for the next 30 to 35 minutes is that we'll just basically understand what is this so-called DevOps and why is this the complete IT industries moving towards this, and what is that we have to know when we say that we have to be on the latest trend on what people are looking at. And talking about the trend, what does company need, and what is that we as an engineers have to know to get into this, and then finally what is that we provide in order for you to help into get into the DevOps. So these are the things that I'll be touch basing on different topics today. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, or once we have the discussions at the end, then we can have a discussion to cover up all the requirements. Okay, or is there any specific topic that you would like to talk other than what I just said? Okay, Shri, I just got your message. Okay, so now before jumping into the topic of DevOps, so if you look, what exactly does the organization need in the current situation of so much of competition that is happening between two different IT organization or company? Now, as we know that the market evolution is quite high and there's a lot of requirements and competition between different companies or organizations to achieve the goal of what the customer wants. So from that way, if you take an IT organization, whether it could be a product-based company where it is trying to deliver their own products by doing some releases very frequently, or they could be into a service related where they are trying to take care of some kind of service, or they are trying to maintain some kind of application which is being taken by someone else. So that is how either a company could be completely towards the product based, or they could be into a service based. Now, regardless of whether they are into service based or they are into some kind of product based, what is that an organization need to sustain into the market? So the very first thing that the organizations are looking at is how quickly can they deliver the task that they are trying to do. So if they are trying to deliver a product or is a release, how quickly they can do the release cycle and give the end product to the customers or the end users. The same thing, if it is a service, how quickly they can do the maintenance so that the end user can access the application or as a system completely, and they can make use of it as a service. So that is when the first thing that they are looking at is how quickly can they deliver the things from an organization's end. Then talking about how quickly can you deliver things, it also comes hand in hand that what is the quality of the thing that you're giving to your customer. So it doesn't mean that now, since our competitor is giving the same kind of service in 6 months, we have to focus on giving that lesser than 6 months, like 4 months or 3 months. But by saying reducing the time, we should not be compromising on our quality. So it is most important that along with reducing in the time, the quality has to be as high as possible, because at the end, if you are delivering something quickly and if you don't make sure that the quality of what our service that the end users are using is not fulfilling the requirements, then pretty much it will be a problem. So that is when quality should also be high considering the delivery time. Along with these two, one of the major factors that also impacts on the organization's requirement is the cost. So now, if an organization wants to deliver something in a very fast pace and with a higher quality, if they put in too much of cost into the production or maintenance, once again it is going to be a problem for them. Because when they are trying to deliver something, and because of too much of cost incurred into the process of maintenance or production, if the selling for their service is quite high, once again the market will not be for them to capture, because looking at the competitor, they'll always be giving at a lesser price or a better price than what we're going to give. So that is when organization should always look at how much of cost reduction can they do or how much of lesser spending that they can do for doing the production or the maintenance. So that is how they can always be on the competition. So along with the fast delivery and the quality keeping high, they also have to ensure on how much of amount in the maintenance or in the production can be reduced, which is most important at this point of time. And finally, on the reduced outages. So when I say reduced outages, importantly, it could be a production or it could be a service. Now, whatever that we are doing, there should be no problem in the life cycle or in the maintenance cycle where things run from end to end without any disturbance. So that is when, if there is a problem where you are trying to do some upgrade or some maintenance, things should work seamlessly, because every minute now is directly the cost and the time which is important for the customer. So that is when whatever maintenance or upgrades that we are trying to do within our organization to give a release, or with respect to a maintenance which is being used by the end user as in service, we have to make sure that things come back and get fixed as soon as possible. So that is the most important thing based on certain factors where we need to keep the outages as minimal as possible. So these are the major factors which an organization is looking so that they can sustain in the market. Now, in order to do all those things, if you look on the other end, people would be doing some kind of activity and they would be following some kind of process or methodologies to get the things done. But when you're mixing everything together as a goal for an organization, how is that the organization can achieve everything together? So along with it, how can they be into the cutting edge technology where they fulfill the customer requirements as well be in the market? So that is when organizations started looking into various different kind of modern methodologies and processes to adapt, through which they can get all these things together along with being into the advanced technology. So from that way, if you look, what is that within the organization people have to do to make sure the organization is meeting this requirement? So that is when, from a broader picture, if you take an organization, you can basically split the organization's people into two groups. One is the development group, the other one is the non-development group. So when I say the development group, so basically people like programmers or developers, QA engineers, performance engineers, and then you'll have build engineers, release managers, production managers, documentation engineers. So all those pretty much who will be responsible in doing some kind of release of the product will be part of the development group. And on the other side, the non-development, which we basically call it as an administrator group. So these are the people or the group who will be taking care of the machine or the system requirements as well as the maintenance of the application. So people like system administrators, network administrators, database administrators, web administrators, it could be anyone who is either taking care of a machine or an application will be part of this non-development group or the administration group. Sometimes we also call them as the operations group. Since they are not doing much of the development, they are focused more into the system or application. So that's how right now you can classify him into the development group and the administration or the operations group. So what is the problem that these two separate groups are facing, and what is the improvement that the organization can bring so that these two groups will help each other and ensure that we meet the organization's requirement? So in that way, if you look from the development group, so basically let's try to understand what problems that they would face. Okay, so when I say the development group, so the development group will be following some kind of software development life cycle, right? So in that life cycle, there will be a bunch of developers who will be writing code, and after writing the code, they will be passing on it to the QA engineers to do some testing. Now, when they pass it on to the QA to the testing, the point that we have to look at is, because of the rapid requirement that we have, the QA cannot just directly take one individual developer's change and test, because from the QA, if they have to test, they need the complete product. But when I say the other way, it is not one developer who's doing the change. So it is a combination of various developers who are working on different features and components, wherein they have to put together everything and then give it to the QA. So that is when there is a lot of waiting period that is put at this stage, where we have to wait until all the developers have completed their work and we pass it on to the QA as a product which has the integration of all the changes given by the developers. So that's one problem. Now let's say we got all the changes integrated, which is being done by the group of developers. Then the QA tries to do some testing, and at that point of time there could be a problem where one of the developers' change is not compatible with others' change. So what will happen at that time? After putting in too much of waiting period, when you try to test or build the product, if something fails, once again, we have to spend a lot of time in identifying who is the right person, because it is not again just the individual developer's change. It is a combination of various developers. So that is when, once again, there's a lot of effort involved in doing some triaging and trying to find out who exactly did the problem or whose changes caused the failure. So that is when we have to once again spend some time in finding out and assigning the problem or the bug back to the developer and get it fixed. So like this, now the cycle keeps going on until all the changes has been tested and verified, which is now going to take a lot of waiting period as well as a lot of effort in finding it out. So thinking about this, we also have to ensure that because of the rapid requirement in the market, there will be many parallel releases and the tasks that the development group has to go through. It is not just one product they'll be doing, there'll be many releases, many products they'll be working. So the same cycle has to be repeated in a different ways for different tasks or work. So considering all these things, there will be huge pressure on the development group where everything has to be completed and verified within the time. That is when the most important requirement for them is how do they ensure that we write the developmented code, and how do you ensure that everything is completed within the given time and verified, which is most important for them. Okay, now keeping that aside, let's go to the operations group or the administration group, and let's see what problems that they face when they have to cope up with the market requirement. So basically you will have a system engineer or a group of engineers who will take care of the administration. Now their primary responsibility will be to take care of a machine or a couple of machines which is available in the data center or the lab. Now the first thing that they have to ensure is all the application or the machine is up and running, so that any user who wants to do some activity, he'll be able to connect to the machine and do some task. Along with it, it's not just enough for us to make sure that the machine is up. We also have to make sure that whatever the system requirements and the maintenance tasks that we have to do should also be fulfilled. So let's take from the system side, you have to do so many upgrades, maintenance. Let's say that you have to take backups of all the applications and the data of the user you have. You need to make sure that application creation or the user creation and deletion should be quick enough. And now let's say on the other way, different users will come up and say that I need to set up some environment, I need to update my libraries. So these kind of smaller tasks to huge tasks will be there on each and every machine, right? Now, if you look, not every machine will be of the same architecture and will not be used for the same purpose, right? So there will be a combination of different application and different tasks that you'll be doing on each machine. Along with it, the one of other important thing which the administrators have to look at is how healthy is the machine and the application. So when I say how healthy, what it means is it is not just sufficient if the machine is running and the application is running. What if your user is connecting to a machine and he's not able to do the task, or let's say that he's trying to do some task on the machine and it is taking longer time to complete. So then even at that point of time there is a problem. So that is when it is most important to ensure that there is always a high availability and accessibility of all the application and machine in terms of the resources which is needed. So the machine should be up, the application should be up, as well as supporting that whatever resources that is needed in terms of space, memory, or the libraries that is needed, everything should be intact. Only then as a user anyone can connect to it and do the day-to-day activity and get the things done faster. So from that way, now it is not just one machine that they are going to take care. As the usage grows, as the number of products and the services that a company has to take care grows, the number of machines will be growing. So that is when there will be, once again, there will be a huge pressure on these engineers to take care of all these things for different machines. So that is when the major focus from the administration side is how good or what is the operational excellence that they can do so that all these machines can be maintained easily and the cost on the maintenance would be reduced as much as possible. So that is the focus what as an operations group or the administration group that they would be facing. So talking about these two separate groups, now as an organization, what is that they have to do so that they can come up or overcome all these problems and ensure that the organization requirements is met? So the solution what the organization are trying to move towards is DevOps. So DevOps simply acts as a bridge which connects these two groups. Okay, so when I say these two groups, rather than working in silos, DevOps is a culture where, note it again, DevOps is a culture where it emphasizes that these two groups, rather than working separately, work collaborated and work together. So that is the first change that the organization is trying to implement as the DevOps process. And what is that DevOps process does? Along with doing the task collaboratively, it ensures that we do the automation as much as possible. So that change in the culture where rather than we working separately, the culture where we collaboratively work together and ensure there is a automation as much as possible right from the beginning of a task, that could be from the development or from a maintenance to the delivery of the task to the end user or to the customer. So that end-to-end solution automation wherein we work collaboratively is what the DevOps culture is all about. Okay, so it is nothing specific to one area what you're going to solve problem, or it is not about one tool where you will try to do some better advancement in that area. But DevOps is a culture from an organization where they have to ensure that both the development on the administration group or the operation groups work together collaboratively and try to do automation as much as possible to meet the organization need to ensure that they deliver tasks to the end user or to the customers at the reduced time with a higher quality and ensuring that there is always reduced cost of production or maintenance. So now, what is this DevOps culture that they have to involve? So when you say the DevOps culture, it is all about trying to put in some best practices, following some modern software methodologies to do the better automation. So in that way, for advancing the development lifecycle. Basically, DevOps says try to introduce some modern software processes or methodologies like continuous integration or continuous deployment or development. So in that way, what is that we are going to do? So in that way, the development group will start following some modern software methodologies like lean methodology or agile way of development. So in that, what happens is, rather than focusing a complete product, you divide the product into components by components. And further, you can still divide the components into smaller and smaller tasks wherein you try to work collaboratively. And in that, as soon as a developer does a change, without putting in too much of waiting period, immediately you try to integrate individual developer's change with the other's latest change and try to create a product and test it immediately. So this way, as soon as every individual developer who is trying to write a code, within let's say 10 to 15 minutes, we will be knowing whether his change is working fine and it is compatible with the product. So that is how you try to advance and reduce the time which is needed for doing the life cycle of the software development. So this way, through this continuous integration and delivery, we will always ensure that the productivity will be higher because we will be saving a lot of time and we will always ensure that the quality is met wherein we try to find out if there is any bug at an earlier stage rather than waiting for a longer time. And not only that, the other requirement that we had is how do you ensure that we work on many parallel releases? So that could be easily achievable by adopting these continuous integration and the continuous delivery processes. Okay, now is it the only thing which DevOps talks? No, because as the DevOps culture, we have to try to do certain automation where we focus on the development side as well as the system side. So that is when the other side which we have to look at is how can we do something better on the infrastructure management. So that is when, rather than going up with physical machines that is needed to do any kind of task for automation or development or testing, now the first thing what people started to use was virtualization. So to keep it in simple, virtualization is all about having a machine within a machine. But since we are focusing on too much of automation in terms of DevOps, virtualization was still there. But if you really go back and look, maintenance of these virtual machines in terms of different hypervisors like VMware or Oracle's virtualization, it is to take a lot of effort and resource because now in order to install, let's say, one VMware application on a machine, we need to have a huge server and we had certain delimits on how many virtual machines that you can run on them. So that is when your maintenance is quite increasing and the effort on that is also increasing. Maybe now we have reduced the effort, but still the maintenance is going to be higher and we won't be getting the efficiency as required. So that is when on the advanced level of the DevOps, things like containers started coming into the market where with the same concept of OS level virtualization, how quickly can you do the virtualization and how quickly can you enable the service to our internal stakeholders or the external stakeholders. So now people don't have to be waiting to get a machine, and once you get a machine, how quick and easy is it for someone to maintain? So that is the focus where we are trying to have through containers. We can do a better way of virtualization. On the other side, now, if you look at some organization, which could be a startup or wherein they want to do some kind of task or some maintenance, which is of a shorter period of time. Now, in that way, they don't have to spend a lot of energy and time and also in terms of cost where you have to set up the infrastructure, you have to set up the network, and then you have to create the access and give it to the end users. So that is when, rather than putting up too much of effort in time of setting and maintenance of all the machine requirement, the cloud came into the picture. So simply what do you mean by cloud? Now, rather than having machine in your lab or in your data center, all you're going to do is access a machine over the internet which is being provided by the service provider. Now, the advantage here is we don't have to worry about where the machine is or who is going to take it. For us, at any point of time, when I need a machine, we will be easily getting the machine from the cloud. So you can do a lot of load balancing, which means, let's say, for some critical task, suddenly you need one more machine or 10 more machines. If you are doing all the setup in procuring or creating a virtual machine and doing the setup, still it is going to take some time. But from the cloud, you can get the machines instantly. So that is when there will be a lot of time that you will be saving and ensuring that the resources is available on the need basis. Second, now if you are buying a machine or you are setting up a machine on your own data center, let's say you are using the project only for 1 month, and after that what will happen? You are not going to use it, but still you are going to pay for the maintenance in terms of effort that is needed, also in terms of the power, right? Because let's say you are buying a machine and if you used for 1 month, you cannot just say that I'm going to throw it up. But still, if whether you're going to use or not, you have purchased it and you have to pay certain maintenance for that. So that is when the cloud again acts as a saver, where you are just going to pay for the service provider only for the amount of hours or the days that you're using. So let's say you don't want the machine after 1 month, you're not going to take the service anymore and you're not paying. So that is how cloud is emerging to be providing a better way of solving the infrastructure requirement for the companies, where you save the time and money and also ensure that the system availability is always there. Okay, so that is why you see and hear a lot about companies moving towards this cloud way of getting the infrastructure done. Okay, now still, as a DevOps engineer, we are not just concerned only about this. We have to still make sure that the automation happens from end to end. So in that way, now, whether a company is using a machine which is physical or a virtual machine or a machine on the cloud, still, for an user to connect to the machine and do some task, he needs some configuration, right? So once again, a person who is going to maintain the administration has to take care of lot of configuration has to be done on different machines in different ways. So that is when there is a new concept or a process called configuration management in DevOps, through which we ensure the automation of state of the machine which is required for the user as he needs. So if a developer logs into a machine, whatever is needed for him for the configuration, you can take care of that. If a QA comes and logs in, you ensure what is needed for that, you can set it up. And on the other way, for your own administration maintenance, whatever is needed. So all those kind of different configurations can be managed using the configuration management, which could be on any kind of machine. And finally, it's not just sufficient for us to take care of all these things, but also through the continuous monitoring, we will have to ensure that all the machines and applications are up and running and it is completely healthy. So that is how we try to be more proactive and see, okay, I think that there's some problem that is going to happen in this machine. Let me try to fix it whenever it is small. So by that way, you ensure that the outage that it is going to cause or the bottleneck that it is going to cause will be reduced. So you always focus from the organization need and not just looking at, hey, this is some small problem I can leave. But from an organization, if you look, if it grows up to be a big one later, it is going to stop all the service and end users will be sitting idle and spending their time doing nothing, which is going to be loss of productivity. So that is when through continuous monitoring, we will ensure that we keep a close eye on all the application and ensure the high availability and accessibility of the machines and application for the user. So in this way, we are going to solve the requirements. So what exactly now as an organization is trying to look. So now people are still working in some kind of automation if you look, but as we bring in the DevOps culture, what is that the organization is looking at where they have to get adapted to different culture and changes. So what is most important when you are trying to enter into a DevOps culture, or you are going to an organization where they, let's say they don't have any kind of DevOps culture and you are trying to implement it, or you are trying to practice the DevOps culture for a particular release or the maintenance product. So in that way, the first and foremost characteristics which is needed now is we have to be a generalist. So as I said, we are not just going to focus on one area of the development or on the administration. As in the DevOps culture, what we are going to do is we are going to focus on different problem areas and try to provide a solution. So now the first thing that being into the DevOps culture, what the organization is looking at is the person should be a generalist wherein he is ready to jump into different kind of problem areas and provide a solution for that. And then implement some modern methodologies of the software development like continuous integration and continuous deployment, through which whatever the development task is done, immediately you test, verify, and also ensure that it is delivered to the customer so that they can access it without a delay. And to ensure that all the system and application is on use, that is a high availability, continuous monitoring is the best practice which we have to implement. Now, is it all about only setting up some tools and process? The most important thing, if you look, which people would be lagging, is the communication. So that is when DevOps also focuses on what is the resilience factor. So resilience is all about how do you ensure that things are back to the normal position and everyone are able to do the task. So that is when communication acts as an important, place in the DevOps. So now being into the DevOps culture, it's not just about fixing things. We also have to effectively communicate and collaboratively work with different stakeholders where if a problem happens, you will just immediately try to jump onto it, communicate to all the people, try to see what is the best solution that you can give as an alternate so that everyone can still continue their work, and as well as how quickly can you solve the problem. So DevOps involves communication as well as collaboratively working on achieving the fix. Okay, so finally, do as much as automation. So that is what the simplest thing that DevOps focuses on. It could be any small problem either in the development or testing or in the deployment or in the system maintenance. Anywhere it could be as part of the life cycle. DevOps focuses that how much of automation can you do. So finally, coming to all these things, how is that as an engineer you are going to solve different kind of problems? So that is when in the DevOps culture we have different set of tools through which you will be solving problems pertaining to a area which will do certain automation and assist certain people. So if we are trying to look in how do we reduce the software development lifecycle time, and for that we have to adapt and implement continuous integration and continuous delivery. So now when you're trying to focus on continuous integration and continuous delivery, now you have to ensure how developer can do his work seamlessly, and in that way how do you ensure him by working on some SCM tools like Git or the other tools where you will help him to write the code and ensure that the code is integrated well. And then to create the product and do further testing and automation, you'll be using different kind of tools like build management tools or continuous integration tools like Jenkins or Hudson, through which you will automate it. And then if you're focusing on the deployment, what is the deployment that you would do? Is it a production deployment, or sometimes we call something like a staging deployment where before the production, which will be a pre-production environment, which will be accessed by the QA and not by customers. So in that case, how do you ensure that the developer, whatever changes he has done, you are integrating and putting it into that staging environment, something like tools like Artifactory or Nexus will help in doing those kind of deployment or delivery. If the requirement is on the system configuration, so that is when, as part of configuration management, there are different tools like Chef, Ansible, Puppet, which will help us to solve the problem. Now, if your requirement is how do you ensure that you virtualize the machine for any kind of process in the development or the testing or for your maintenance itself, how quickly can you bring a machine? So that's when the containers concept like Docker will be helpful to automate it. In the same way, let's say the organization is focusing only on the infrastructure side. So they have a huge data center, but it is causing a lot of problem for them in maintenance, and to ensure that they are meeting the requirement for upcoming releases or the maintenance, what new things they have to do and how should they adapt to have a variation where whenever they need, you should be able to give more machines, and when they no need, you should not be using so many machines. So that is how you ensure the cost and the requirement. So in that way, from the cloud service providers, there are different kinds of cloud service providers like Amazon and OpenStack. Using them, you will be providing the solution for the infrastructure on cloud. And further, if you look monitoring, if that is most of the important thing that you have to do, then there are different tools like Nagios, Splunk, using which you will be providing a monitoring system through which you can always see which machine is going down or which machine is healthy and which is not working fine. And in that way, if still it's not just going to end, there are different areas where you will always look about automation. If you are focusing towards the database side, or one of the requirements which the industry will always have is how do you ensure that what is going wrong and how do you evaluate? So we always need a metrics, right? So if you say that I'm doing good in some terms, how do you prove that to the organization? So they need a number. You have to say that last time I did this and this time I've done more or I'm done lesser. So everything should be based on the numbers in terms of metrics. So for that, log management is most important. So that is when you will go with certain tools that we have like Logstash or Elasticsearch, where you take the data, store effectively, and put it as a dashboard whenever is needed. And finally, scripting is again one of the key area in automation. So it's not just for DevOps, but scripting is most important in terms of automation, because for doing some process or some activity where you cannot just directly do on a single tool, then you need a script which can act as a bridge or as a wrapper on any of these tools. And not only that, for your day-to-day activity, if you want to do certain automation so that you can do the things quickly, then still you need scripting. So that is how scripting plays a vital role in automation, which is most important in the DevOps. So finally, what is that you should be knowing? So now, when you say that you're a DevOps engineer, you have to be a generalist wherein you are ready to solve different kind of problems which the organization can make use and try to achieve their goal. So that is when, with the combination of different tools, you will be working on different set of tools which will be pertaining to a particular problem area. But as in, if you can see, the DevOps workflow is not just focusing on one area. It begins right from the coding where a developer start working throughout the life cycle where you do the build, create a product, test it, and then you go ahead with the deployment, which involves getting a machine, configuring, and also monitoring these machines. So that is when DevOps focuses from end to end. And depending on an organization rate, you will be working on different set of tools to provide a workflow through which the company can overcome and achieve their goal. So finally, for someone who is not into the DevOps, or still you might be focusing on one area of problem solving. So as a course, what we generally do is we try to give all these things together, because now as a DevOps engineer, you should be well versed and you should be knowing different areas on which you will be providing the solution for a particular problem. So that's when we focus on both the sides, wherein we focus being a developer or into the development, what is the kind of activity that you can do to do the automation, as well as on the operation side or on the administration side, what and all that you will do to focus towards the system requirements. So that is when, being a DevOps engineer, you won't just focus, let's say that, hey, I'm a developer, I'll think only about development. No. Or I'm a system administrator, I'll think only about doing system administration. Because now, as I said, an organization needs to reduce the cost that you're putting. So that is when, rather than having a person who's doing only the development or who's doing only the administration, they need someone who can do both the things together. So that's why if you see the culture change, which is causing so much of requirement for the technical skill, where a DevOps engineer or being an engineer who adopts the DevOps culture and who is capable of doing different things. So that is why the pay scale will also be quite higher when compared to different people. Because rather than paying two different guys, the company would always be benefited by paying one guy who could do different tasks and who's ready to do different problems. I mean, ready to solve different problems. So in that way, the DevOps, as a course, we ensure that we introduce you to different problem areas, and in that we will take up any one of the tool which is widely required in the market, and you get well versed in that. So at any point of time it is required. With that understanding, you will always have a good foundational background help you to do the advanced tasks, or you can learn different things with the help of that. So that is the way that we always focus and give on all these requirements that is needed, so that you can be as a DevOps engineer and be ready to solve different problems on your own. And that's what I had from my side. So any questions, and I'm open for discussion if there's any comments or queries. Okay, so as I was saying, the first focus as DevOps is you're not just focusing on one area. So why is that? Okay, basically, why do you need a machine? So either a developer or a QA person, or you have to do some kind of administration through which you create a machine and you allow some user to use it, right? So in that case, when you are trying to create a machine, rather than purchasing a new machine, what is that you can do to quickly create a machine and configure the machine and give it to the end user? So that is when, until certain time, if your focus is to reduce the cost of the machines rather than buying it physically, you can always think about using virtualization, and there were tools like VMware where what you can do is you can create virtual machines and give it to the end users. So let's say your company is trying to do some new release or trying to take care of some maintenance, and for that they need some 10 new machines. What is that you're going to do? Are you going to purchase 10 new physical machines and configure, or you will think about making use of the existing servers, and on that can we do some virtualization wherein we will create new 10 virtual machines and we will give it to the users and they start working. So that is when virtualization is going to help you in solving the problem for creating and accessing machine. So it's not just focused on one area. So as a DevOps engineer, now you could be a system administrator where until now, if a problem is given to you, hey, there is one requirement where the user says, or this group in the business says that they need 10 machines. So immediately you think about creating 10 machines. So rather than buying 10 machines, I can do some virtualization using some containers or VM, and I can create some 10 machines. Yeah, that is the normal automation that you will focus. But being a DevOps engineer, you will go a step above it and you will say, how is that you can further reduce the cost involved in it, and how do you ensure the maintenance of that is also done, and how can you ensure that the requirement will be scaled up or scaled down based on the need? Because if this 10 machines that is needed is only for, let's say, 1 week, then the effort that you're going to put for it, if it is more than a week, then it is of no use. So that is when, as a DevOps engineer, you don't just focus on one tool like VMware. You just step out and you see what are the other possibilities where, from your side as an administrator, you can easily set up a machine and you can give it to the user, and when the user accesses, he will have all the configuration done. So that is when now you will think about creating a new machine using some tools or advanced technology like containers, or you will try to go to the cloud and try to help to set up a machine, and as well as you try to implement the continuous monitoring and configuration management, where a user, whenever he needs, you will be allowing them to have a machine as well as the configuration done on that. So that is the level of automation that you will be focusing as a DevOps engineer, and not just on solving only that area. So you should be focusing on the different areas and implementing the best practices. Okay, so the question is how Docker interact with AWS cloud. Okay, if I understand, you want to know how does Docker go hand in hand with cloud, right? So now cloud, what is that going to do? It is going to solve your infrastructure requirement. Let's be very clear on that. Now, you want to set up some machine and create an infrastructure. So when I say infrastructure, what are the things that you have? You have machines, you have network through which they are connected, and you have some applications which is running on them, and it also consists of the users on who will be accessing it and what different access that they will have, right? So all these things together is what we call it as a infrastructure. So now for that, how is that you are going to create a machine? So rather than you doing all those things on some kind of machine which is available on your premises, you can go to the cloud and get the machine whatever is needed for you and set up that closed network through which you will allow who should be accessing and who should not be accessing. So that is the cloud. Now, within that, so take any one of the machine on your infrastructure which is on the cloud. If that machine is used by, let's say, a complete QA team, okay, and that team should contain some 5 members as an example. Now, for different kind of performance testing, let's an example. Now, they need some environment which is repeated. Let's say they are trying to do a performance test and they want to test on 10 different machines. So within the same machine, how is that you are going to give 10 different requirements or 10 different environments? So that is when, rather than you going ahead and creating 10 more machines on the cloud, within the same machine, you can ensure that the QA or anyone else as an user will have different virtualization of the environment using Docker. So that is when they can ensure they can easily replicate the environment, or you want to ensure that different users work on different configuration on the same machine. So that is when Docker doesn't just solve your virtualization, but it also ensures how can you duplicate or replicate the environment. So that is when Docker is most used, because people focus only, when I say Docker, it is not just virtualization. Yeah, rather than having a machine inside a machine, you can use Docker, which will act as a OS level virtualization on any machine. But in addition to that, using Docker, you can replicate the environment. That is when, for example, you have an application installed on a machine. Within the same machine, can you replicate the same application? It is not so easy. But now, using Docker, you can create something called as container or box, which will have that application. And you can give the same thing to any user who is running on any other machine. So that is when, on top of an existing machine, you can use Docker and you can have your own environment, which will be easy for you to scale up or replicate. So that is when AWS or cloud is from the infrastructure need, and Docker is majorly from your environment requirement, which could be used by a developer or a QA or a system administrator. Did you get that? Any other questions? Was I audible to everyone, or was there any problem that you guys couldn't hear me? Yeah, any other questions or any doubts? Okay, so to just close it up, complete IT requirement is needs how quickly can we deliver something and how much of cost that can be reduced in it. So that is when we have to being a engineer focus on what different things can we do. So we have to come out of our standard culture on which we were working, saying that, hey, I'm a particular engineer and my roles and responsibilities are only in this. As I said, we have to come out of that culture where if you are a developer, don't just focus on the development. Think about what are the operations side that you can do. And if you are an administrator, come out of the culture wherein think about doing automation where you could help the development cycle also. So that is when the organization needs more people who could do these kind of different automations together. And as of now, that is called as DevOps. So tomorrow it could be called as something else, but it's all a beginning where the organization needs some guys or people who would be able to solve different problems which could help them to automate the end-to-end solution wherein they can deliver things quickly and reduce the cost whichever is put into it. Sorry, how about the file server or SQL servers? Yes, everything. See, don't just think only on one particular area. That's what I'm saying. So what is your problem now? If your problem is you are having a machine and on that machine you are having a SQL server. Okay. Now, what is the problem that you are facing? So you should look on that and how is that you can do the automation through a DevOps engineer or being into the DevOps culture. So one of the best suggestions that I will say is when you will move to cloud. Now, you have a server on which you have installed SQL and you are maintaining. Suddenly, there is a problem and the machine goes down. What will you do? So you have to think about setting up some high availability or failover mechanism. So what do you mean by failover? In case if this machine goes down, you should be still able to run the application on some other machine. So for doing that, if you have your own infrastructure, what is that you will think? You have to set up one more machine and ensure that the data on this machine is replicated on that. So that is how if something goes wrong, you can take the same data, set it up on a different machine and bring it up, right? So, but still, for doing it, you have to do certain steps manually. The same thing, what you can do in cloud is, rather than having the server on a machine which is on your data center, you can think about having it on a cloud where we have mechanisms through which if something goes wrong to that machine, automatically through the cloud, we will be able to set up a failover machine and you can switch the application or transfer the load from this machine to that machine. So that is how you can try to replace your existing infrastructure through which you will be able to achieve the scaling up or scaling down requirement for the organization as well as ensure that it is always highly available. So that is how you will be thinking about not just focusing on one area, but as an end user as well as a administrator, how is that you can do the process simplified and being in more effective way of doing the operations. Okay, so if there are no questions, and as I said, focus on automation is what DevOps culture is all about, and for that you have to be ready to solve different problems, and for that you have to be aware of different problem solving areas and different tools. Okay, so that is what is the most important requirement that the organizations are having. So by saying that, let me stop my talk so far that I had, and I appreciate you guys being sitting there for almost an hour talking to what I was trying to let you know, guys. So please get back to us if you have any questions, and I appreciate your time being here for a long time. So good night, and have a pleasant evening. Bye-bye.